Welcome to the RAG Podcast, the weekly show where I interview recruitment owners who are prepared to tell their unique story of growth. This is all in aid of helping future and existing recruitment businesses who are looking to do similar things. Now, growth means different things to different people. So by tuning in every week, you're no doubt going to find information that's relevant to you. On today's episode of the RAG Podcast, I'm joined by Jim Sloan. Jim is the CEO and founder of Navartis, a specialist recruitment agency with multiple international locations specializing in the infrastructure sector. Now, Jim started 18 years ago. He has over 110 staff and has 2 million in EBITDA per year. And what I love about Jim's story and what we go into in today's episode is his laser focus and deliberate actions along the way to build the business he has today. So we talk about how he started the business, how he achieved an MBO from the parent company after 4 or 5 years, and everything that he's done since to grow a scalable business that doesn't operate around him personally. So if you're looking to grow and exit and scale, then this is the one for you. Without further ado, Jim, welcome to the RAG Podcast.
Thank you for having me, Sean.
Pleasure.
Yeah.
In our hometown.
It is.
Together.
Sheffield.
Yeah. It's one of them I think you're the only guest that I know that I've got penciled in for this season that lives in Sheffield.
Yeah. The weird thing is I've actually had Christmas lunch in this room, believe it.
Have you?
I have.
Was it good?
Excellent.
Was it?
Yeah.
We looked at Christmas here last year, but they only take groups of 6.
Yeah.
And even if you got like 10,
yeah.
I was like, could I have 2 tables next door? And they were like, no.
Yeah.
I was like, what do you mean? They're like, no, we can't guarantee that on Christmas. So we're going to another pub, the Prince of Wales this year.
Yeah. Yeah. Close to me and you, I think.
Yeah, it is,
just around the corner.
It's a local one.
Yeah.
Well, Jim, thanks for coming in. Thanks for driving down the road in the traffic. I always start with I've given you a brief introduction, but it never does it justice. So for the people that don't know you, give us I don't want any of the story, just who you are, sort of size, operating model of your business in like a minute, and then we'll go back and tell the story.
All right, cool. So Jim Sloan, run a company called Navartis. We are 110 to 120 heads, operate in 6 locations in the UK. So, six locations, 3 in the UK, 1 in Ireland, 1 in the US, 1 in Canada.
Wow.
65 to 70 million turnover, 10 million or north of 10 million NFI, sort of 2 million EBIT. We operate in primarily infrastructure, so it's senior level engineers in infrastructure, in rail, telecoms, power in the UK and international markets. That's kind of the
Amazing
headline.
And that is that's a sizable business, right?
It is.
We'll talk about how you got there, but I guess I'm just going to start with a question. Are you where you thought you'd be at this point?
No. I think throughout my career, probably like everyone running a business, you always think it's going to go a lot quicker. And my advice to anyone, if they ever ask when starting a business, is it's just a lot harder than you think, and it's going to take a lot longer than you think to get where you want to be. So I think I've always lived my business life, although it has changed more recently, I think, having a family, which I'm sure we'll get onto later, but I've always spent my career always feeling I'm kind of behind the curve and kind of chasing it.
Right. Well, let's find out more. So how did you get into the recruitment sector is always where I'd like to start.
Okay, fell into it.
Everyone does.
I've been doing recruitment for 20 plus years, running a business for over 18. So I think when people got into recruitment when I started, pretty much everyone fell into it. Part of the job was trying to explain to clients what recruitment actually is. So I went travelling, came back from travelling, did Southeast Asia, Australia, just backpacking.
Very
for a
familiar.
year. Yeah, it's great memories. Got back, had a credit card debt, needed a job, went into an agency who'd advertised a job. They said...
Was that in Sheffield?
It was actually in Rotherham.
Right.
So it's a temporary job to work in a sales call centre or something. They offered me a temporary job doing administration, then got me on the phones and pretty much that.
Was that the recruitment company that brought you into their business?
Yeah, and I just loved it from the get-go.
What was that business called?
It was a business called Kinetic that we, further on, I left, went travelling again, came back and worked for them a few years. And then they originally gave us a financial backing set up what was Kinetic Rail that then turned into Navartis.
Right. So
How old were you when you started with them?
I was about 22.
Okay.
And I set up when I was about 29.
Very similar story to me, really. I went from teaching in Sheffield, travelling, landed in Australia. I didn't do the backpacking route in Australia. I went into recruitment there.
Right.
So my teaching wasn't valid, my qualification. So every English and Irish lad that looked like they had any money was in recruitment. I was like, I'll do that. And then I came back. So I was 26 when I landed in London and and then I started Hoxo at 30. So it's quite a similar, I can relate to it. I also like the fact you went back travelling. I didn't do that. In some ways I wish I did it.
No, it was good.
So how did you take to the job? Like, what was your natural ability like and your performance as a recruiter?
I think it was the first job I had. It took me a little while to get my head around what recruitment was, because as I say, at that particular time, I think the industry was like worth 4 or 5 billion or something, and it's 40, whatever it is today. So it took me a little while to get my head around it, but I just loved it. Speaking to candidates, speaking to clients, and feeling like you're adding some value. I just found it really addictive. And this was in the day, of course, before you had job boards and a phone with you. So I was taking piles of CVs home and ringing through them. But I just loved it.
Wow. Ringing paper CVs at home.
Yeah. Showing my age.
You're not old enough for that, Jim. I'm not having it. So you fast forward to the point where you're saying the company backed you to start. So when did you always know you wanted to be an entrepreneur, or where did this come from, this kind of desire to start a business?
100%. So I was the kid at school who was selling trainers, or like there was a guy I knew whose dad had like a clothing store, and he used to let us have stuff on sale or return. So I'd be the kid in school selling a pair of like Fila trainers or a pair of jeans or a coat or whatever, knowing that if I couldn't sell it, I could send it back. But they were all really weird and wonderful colours, because there was the stuff they couldn't sell. So it'd be like a bright red or bright green pair of trainers or something. But
that's the shit I got given.
Yeah. So I was definitely always someone who wanted to set something up. Mm-hmm. And I got to, like I say, 29, 30. I'd saved up maybe 10, 20 grand, not a lot of money, but there was another guy that the company brought in from a large oil and gas recruiter that gave him some financial backing. He'd done 5 years and kind of grown the company. So there was a route there for me. So it was pretty much I was going to leave and do something on my own, but then I pitched it to the MD at the time. He obviously liked the idea. Looking back with hindsight, it was like a no-brainer. Yeah. It was like I was going to leave, you were going to retain me, but at the time,
were you at a point in your career where you knew, like, were you confident you were good enough to do it? Or did you need that backing to kind of... Would you have gone and done it yourself?
Yeah, I'd have 100% gone. And there was a few moments where we were trying to thrash out what the deal was going to be, because as we started, I was a third owner, but it was a bit unique in that it was always set up to be an MBO. So we'd grow it to a certain size that was agreed, and then we do.
That is very specific. Yeah, I don't think I've ever come across that.
There's lots of businesses out there now, isn't there? That sort of model's available. Back then, it wasn't. So for me, it was kind of the safety net. But it came at a price, because obviously years later we grew the business quite substantially, and then had to do a management buyout, which we had to fund and then fundamentally pay off. So, but to answer your question, I think I was definitely confident enough to at least know I had to give it a go. But I think, like everyone starting a business, it's that the right balance for me is that nerves and excitement. You're kind of nervous, kind of make it happen, but excited.
So 2006.
Yeah.
How old are you at that point?
Be 29.
29, you said. Yeah. So what was your life like outside of work when you started?
I'd say back then it was just 100% work. Everything was centred around work.
No kids or anything at that point?
No kids.
Just when you were living on Salter Lane, living the highlight?
Yeah, it was actually before that. So, I mean, it probably tells a story. I'd been with a partner we'd been together from being 17, and we divorced at, was that 30... I can't remember now, 34, 35 or something.
So you were married to your first wife at this point?
Yeah, but I probably wasn't the best partner at the time, because it was just 100% work. So that was it, and then we grew it sort of fairly substantially. Our period timing was quite good, so we picked an industry that was as recession proof as possible, because infrastructure, you can predict where the spend's going to go.
How do you do that?
It's all published by the government. So my thought was we looked for a market that was heavily contract biased, which I think is really important if you want to scale a business, because you've got that recurring revenue. So we were looking for a market that had long-term contracts, ongoing investment, which infrastructure is. You can't stop spending on it because it's always been upgraded. And it had to be an industry that offered longevity contract at a high value. And we didn't really worry about perm so much. So that's why we picked the industry we did, which was pretty fortuitous, because then there was a big recession in 08, 09, which was pretty brutal. But
so where were you at that point then? So you started 2006, 3 years of work.
We'd got up to about an office of maybe, within a couple of years, sort of maybe 12, 13 people, and then we went down to 6, to the point we just actually got into a bigger office that could get 30. And then we had to take it right down to 6 people, which just felt like this empty office, really, to the point that the landlord rang me and said, "Is everything okay?" Because I think he'd had some workmen or something come round, and they'd rung him saying, "I think your tenants are moving out," because there were so few of us in the office. But yeah, it was pretty good in some ways, because we learned a lot in that recession. So at that point, we were doing about 5 million revenue in sales. We were profitable, maybe making a couple $100,000, maybe dropped down to $100,000 throughout the recession, couple of years, then we kind of bounced back. But I would say it was a great time in the sense that you had to look at your business inside out, because there was so little work, loads of suppliers, unless you had a really compelling reason for clients to use you, which ours was just being super niche in certain areas, that internal recruitment.
What was your role like back then?
Well, I think I was always very clear in that I wanted to scale a business, which I think really helped. So, the old expression, work on the business, not in the business. So I'd build for maybe the first year, 18 months, but as quickly as I could, I got off that.
That's the biggest contributor, isn't it?
Yeah, and everything was, even though we were part of another group, it was completely independent. They were kind of in industrial, blue-collar type agency. So we had to build everything up. So yeah, my time was primarily around every function of the business, just trying to scale it, looking at bigger businesses. I'd have a map of kind of what we've got, what they've got, names in different boxes, and what we've got to go and recruit for. So yeah, it was very much just scaling it up. So we got to 2014. At that point, we were doing 20 million in sales, about 3.3 NFI, which would be about 4 million with inflation now. And we were doing comfortably over 1 million EBIT. So we were actually bigger than the company in terms of profitability than the company that gave us the financial backing. We got an agreement that we could do the MBO upon hitting certain criteria, and we had a year left before it expired. If we didn't do it in that period of time, the chances are it'd have been a renegotiation on the price. And then we got the funding, so we were the first MBO to be funded by, it was RBS that did it, post the recession, the first recruitment business. So yeah, which was a massive experience.
Did the recession and that kind of shrinking scenario help you in the fact that the business was valued lower than it would have been?
Yeah, it probably did. I always remember. So I think it was one of the accountants had said at the point we negotiated the price, it was overvalued. At the point we did the MBO, it was undervalued. That said, we'd still been minimal risk. We'd been pretty much profitable from probably year 2. And we had to pay, a sort of quite big ticket.
Are you paying all the time as well, or not? Was there like an ongoing management charge, dividends?
There was a management charge, but it was fairly small, so that played in our favour. I mean, the pros to it is we could just really focus on a front end business, grow the revenue, and
back end.
slowly we took everything in-house, but we never had to worry about the funding or the
Did you get like a salary on day one stuff?
Yeah, I did. And I'd say this was one of the big moments, probably like for you, I'm sure, when you set up, like every founder, you kind of get that moment where you've got to just bite the bullet and do it. And if you don't, you probably regret it forever, like lots of people do. For us, that moment, the first bit we'd done, we'd got it to a good size. But for me, I'd got to the point where I was earning, over a six-figure salary as an employee of the company that I was a third owner. But I was also earning probably similar, if not more, in dividends. So as a third owner. So I'd got to the point where, I looked around to my sort of friends and I was doing really, really well. I paid my flat off on Salter Lane and living the life, got a nice car, all that sort of stuff. And now I'm having to go and borrow a lot of money. I'm going to have to forego my dividends. I'm going to have to roll over some dividends into the company. And if it goes wrong, then I'm kind of back to square one. But
when you say third owner,
yeah,
who are the other two?
Third owner in that I owned a third, so I owned I owned 30.
So so it was only one other business that owned 60.
Yeah, so the parent company Kinetic owned the remaining. Right. I think it was 60. I had 35. They had 65. Right. So the MBO was to buy the 65% out, which is what we did. And
what's the process like to go to the bank and is it?
Yeah, it's. Again, and this was one of the positives of doing it the way we did it. I got introduced them by the parent company. The first time they met me, it was a bit of a courtesy meeting because there was just at that time no money being lent. It was really the back end of the recession. And I'd done okay and then met them again. And over a period of probably 18 months, I'd met them maybe 4 or 5 times. And every time I had to make sure that whatever we said we were going to deliver, we absolutely delivered over. So we had this really good run in terms of revenue and profitability to the point that they started to get, I think, pretty confident in me and the business to the point that when we did the deal, they were fairly keen to lend. But it was big for them because it was over I think it was like 1.2 million they lent in an unsecured loan, and then it was what funds we had in the company and part of the ID line.
How long did you have to pay
3 years. So I mean, it was the process was a real eye opener because a part of it was an unsecured loan. You had to go through due diligence. And the due diligence, this is the bank will send an accountancy firm as kind of an impartial to basically see if there's any skeletons or are you what you say you are. And it was like the equivalent of, is it Clive on The Apprentice, where it's just absolutely just ripping apart everything you say. So I'd gone in feeling like quite credible, and by the end of it, I'm feeling I'm questioning myself.
Yeah, sure.
But they were really, really thorough because what they want to make sure is that you are in a good position and it's not a fluke, like you can pay this money back. And it's a slight funny story. At the end, the guy rang me after like what felt like an eternity of him just beasting me and grilling me, and then he kind of said, great company, and would you be interested in using us as an auditor? And I was like, no. I should have done really because, they did a great job on the due diligence. But the learning from it is it made you look at your business completely different because I think when you grow it, it's very much front end, operational. And what they do is it's kind of zooming out and looking at it holistically to every bit, risk management and being more analytical. I'd say that was the massive takeaway.
So that process almost gave you a lot of education.
Huge, yeah. Being just really analytical at looking at trends and making decisions based on the analytics rather than, this feels right, which there's nothing wrong with that, but I think a combination of the two.
What was the risk though? Like, let's say shit went wrong. Did you have to guarantee houses and things? Did you have to put some personal guarantees on it?
No, but I rolled over. It was probably like about 150 grand's worth of dividends at the time. But also the big risk was I had a company that was profitable, that I was taking, a really good standard of living and dividends out. And the risk was if we didn't pay the loan back, then they could recall it and I'd be back to square one. So we had to pay that 1.2 million quarterly over 3 years. And, it was seared in my brain, the clause that said that if you, can't make a payment, then we can recall the loan. So all of a sudden...
What if they recall it? What does that mean? You go bankrupt, basically.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So you'd be back to square one. So I had loads of sleepless nights.
Yeah, I was going to say, how does that affect... And are you still with that first wife at this point? Have you split up?
Yeah, up to... 2000... we'd split up just, I think, maybe a year before that.
Right, so you're in an interesting situation then. Yeah. So you're like, you're back to your like mid-30s single.
Yeah.
This business pressure.
Yeah. Yeah, and it really made you focus on cash, because then I had to make sure there was enough cash. So it was kind of, if everything I assume goes wrong and I can only do half of it, can we still service the loan? And if it goes wrong again, can we still service the loan? And
at this point, you're not billing at all either?
No, I only ever billed for probably 18 months.
How many people have you got reporting into you at this point?
At the time we did the MBO, we had 28 people. We had about 22 billers in 6
How many leaders that you're...
Probably about 3 or 4.
Right. So you've got to have so much faith in those guys.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. But the thing for us at that time when we did the MBO, we were probably about 85% contract business. So our average contract length was about 18 months. Yeah. So it was pretty predictable. And as long as we got the quality right, you would know that, if we had 150 contractors and we started the next year at 200, you'd got a real clear idea of what your revenue was going to be. So we weren't really relying on perms at that time.
And you weren't, all right, so key personnel, even though they're important, you'd have the bandwidth and time to replace someone when you're in that.
Yeah, I mean, there were still like critical people, and that's been one of the really I don't know, great things about the experience. There's people that have worked with us now for sort of 15 years and have kind of been there, pretty much the whole time we've been going. So we always had like that bedrock of core people that expanded over the years.
So 2010, you rebranded as Navartis. Where did that name come from?
It was just made up, really. A bunch of us in a room. I think kinetic meant energy in motion or something like that. It was a Latin word that... It was a similar word, but it didn't sound right. We played around with the letters, but we just wanted something completely different from the group. And one of the problems we had, we'd started as kinetic rail. So, of course, once you start getting into different markets...
your name actually holds you back a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, so we actually rebranded. I think it was 2008. We did it fairly early on, or maybe it was 10, actually. And that was it. So, yeah.
How did it feel once you'd got rid of that monkey off your shoulder, effectively? You've got to pay the bank, but it's yours. How did that feel? Was it different?
It felt a bit underwhelming, if I'm honest.
Everyone says that.
And I'm sure it must, and I'm sure it's the same when you exit. So, part of our journey was the first bit was the MBO, when I had to sign lots and lots of paperwork. It always seems to be on a Friday evening it happens. I was in a lawyer's office until about 7 o'clock. You've got to sign like 10 copies of about 20 documents. And I remember driving up the motorway. I was going to Leeds that evening, and the lawyer rang me and said, congratulations, it's yours, type thing. And I was like, is that it? Yeah. It felt so flat. Kind of underwhelming. And then it's just business as usual. Yeah. But now with this extra pressure of paying the money back.
Was the pressure of paying the money back different to the pressure of knowing you had a 65% shareholder?
Yeah, massively. Yeah, just all of a sudden that safety blanket's gone, and you've taken on all this debt that that you've got to get that paid.
How did that next 3 years go then?
Really well. I mean, we like to say it was skill, but I think we just hit the timing was like really good, and we just.
What year is this? 2010, 2011. Yeah. So you just come out of that. That was when I was entering the UK the recruitment sector. Yeah. And it was a pretty good time.
Yeah, and I think looking back as well, because we'd really formed in that recession period. Lots of the guys we'd brought in, came out of the recession and just absolutely smashed it, because anyone who could really do well or come into the industry in such a tough economic time have just got great skills, so then they really, really take loads of market share when they come out. And I think we've seen the opposite of that in the last few years post-COVID. Lots of people have come into the industry, no skills, have done okay because the market was so easy. The market's toughened up and rebalanced, really, in my view anyway, and those people have kind of struggled. So I think that gave us a really great run in terms of growth. It went really well. We managed to pay the debt back in 2 years. So, I just couldn't wait to say monkey off your back.
You got it back early? You paid it early?
Yeah, I just couldn't.
Was there no early repayment penalties or anything like that?
No, not that I can remember. And I think what we did at the time, we shopped around with a load of different banks, and we got lots of different offers from, I think, 6 different banks, and we took the best out of all of them, went back to our current lender and pretty much said, look, we want to stay with you because we're loyal and you've been good to us, but at the same time, you need to match this. So it got paid off after 2 years, and we got a better deal out of it. The deal we had at the time, actually, when we first started the business, when we first did the MBO, and we were negotiating the deal, because the parent company also banked with them at the time, the deal we had wasn't great, but they wouldn't give us a better deal because the parent company kind of financed with them, so it meant they would have had to change both. So that was it, 2 years, and paid back, and then that was a good feeling.
So talk me through the business beyond then. So with 2012, 2013 now, you paid your debt off. What was the future at that point in your mind?
Yeah, that was probably the most exciting bit for me, because the first bit was about growth, scaling a business so we could finance an MBO. To got to be profitable and really focus on profit. The next bit is kind of the same, because you got to pay the debt back.
You can't grow that. You can't push all your money into it. You kind of grow,
but it's kind of quite modestly, because you've got to service the debt. So after that, it's kind of the shackles are off, and then you can really start pushing it. Which we did do. I can't remember how many people we had when we paid it off, but I bet it was about 40, maybe 45. So, if you take from that period, say 2016, 17 to 110, then it's really been pushing that growth. So we opened up new locations. We opened up in Australia. We opened up in Canada. We opened up in Ireland. We made an acquisition in the UK.
That's like Project Resource.
Project Resource. So we acquired them and kind of merged into the group and rebranded them. And then we'd opened up in Leeds. It's just kind of been organic growth, really, apart from that small acquisition into different markets. I say into different markets, different locations, but fundamentally doing the same.
Why do you need
markets?
Locations in that, like in 2024? I know guys in Basingstoke smashing up the west coast of America. Like, why do you need to be on site in?
I think there's 2 reasons. I think one, we can talk about it perhaps when we talk about work-life balance a little bit. But for me, I was very clear. I wanted to scale a business. So to scale a business, I really took the time to understand what a potential buyer would value.
Okay.
Not that the business is for sale or might not be for years to come. But it made sense to me to try and build a business that would be valuable
and attractive
in the eyes of potentially a buyer. So I spent quite a lot of time with M&A people to understand what the things are. And one of the things would be an international presence, boots on the ground, contract book, etc. So that was one of the reasons. But also we grew one location where we probably got about 60 people in. I think it's about...
Just Doncaster.
Yeah, in Doncaster, which is the head office. Which probably has about 45 recruiters or something like that. And we always found that a bit like a contract book. If you were contract back in the day, you grow, and initially, like every guy you put out, contract is growth. But you plateau at a level where you're still placing just as much as you were.
Your finishes are equal, if not greater than you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think maybe it's different in certain locations, but certainly in that particular location, I think the talent pool's it's a good talent pool, but it's fairly restrictive because it's a small market town. So what we found is to grow beyond maybe 50 recruiters was quite difficult. So going into different areas allowed us to attract more talent, but also more leaders that had the ability and the knowledge in that local area to go and grow a business.
Yeah. And when it comes to like growing, like, so the shackles came off was a phrase that really has, has stuck with me. And I think what people maybe don't know from my experience of talking to founders is what percentage profit or like, how do you organize your ratios when you're looking to grow? So obviously buying out the lender, you knew what you had to pay for. So your profit, must have had a margin you had to hit. Once that's gone, do you remember or do you have any guidance on how you still protect the business but reinvest back in to ensure that you're making some profit and growing at a sustainable but aggressive way? Yeah,
so for us, it's if I was to pick one indicator out of all, and there's lots of different indicators you could use, but for me, it'd be net margin. So fundamentally, how efficient we are at turning the top line GP down into bottom line profit. So a general guide for us would be, so if I give two examples to kind of add some colour to it. So when we did the MBO, we were doing 3.3 million NFI and we did, I think it was about 1.3 net. So we were running at over 40% in terms of converting every pound, 40 pence would end up as profit. That was unsustainable if you wanted to grow.
Is that after your cost of people and everything?
So everything, 40 pence a pound. So it was unsustainable because we were running on fumes, like we didn't spend any money on anything because it was all about driving profitability. Once you grow, you've then got to start investing in L&D, in internal recruitment, in a marketing department and all that.
And headcount.
And headcount, of course. So you're building a platform that ultimately will reduce that net margin, but will pay off in the long term because you've got the platform to add the numbers in. So currently we'll operate at, it'll change from location to location, but in the bigger locations, about 25%. I'd say 25 to 30% is healthy for us.
Good,
if we were really pushing headcount, I'd expect that, more than 25. If we were being a bit more prudent, I'd expect that to kind of move up to 30. And it's a massive indicator because I was having a conversation just the other day, actually, with one of the guys in our team, or one of the teams, where we work in a market that's got really big fees. So it's really easy to look at that bit of the business and go, wow, we do fantastic because the fees are great. But for me, what we should really be looking at is the productivity. And that's, well, how many placements do we actually make and what's feasible? What should we be making? Because the end number is only a byproduct of, in part, the fees. Yeah. So back to the NFI, for me, it's the biggest single, not the NFI, the net margin is the biggest single measure to tell you how productive we're actually being. And as I say, with this particular area, I'd rather focus on, have we got the maximum productivity? Because the number will just be a byproduct of getting that bit right.
But it's knowing the fees might be bigger, but the volume's not there, or whatever. You have to understand the intricacies of that. I'm interrupting today's episode to talk about our sponsor, Atlas, the only AI-first recruitment platform on the market. Now, imagine you had a genuine assistant following you around, listening to everything you said on the phone or in meetings, and then doing all the admin for you that you don't want to do. Well, that is actually possible now through Atlas CRM. It's the only platform with fully integrated AI, so there's no note-taking whatsoever and no need to buy any additional software. Now, they've got so many amazing features, specifically customize and integrate this platform easily, okay? They've got templates that can be adjusted to fit any document requirement and integrate seamlessly across Atlas platform for easy recall. Okay, so Atlas is brand new to the market and launching so rapidly. For the first 200 members, they are offering what's called a founder's license, okay? And the founder's license is going to be a 40% discount for life, okay? And it's only for the first 200. Now, if you want to be in the first 200, you're listening to this episode through The Rag, you're going to have a great chance. Go to www.recruitwithatlas.com/The Rag and sign up on that page. All right, let's get back to the show. So, I mean, from my experience, I think that's still quite high net profit. If you're talking like 30% or 25%. A lot of recruitment companies running less than 10% in terms of when they're trying to grow.
Yeah.
Some just run that way because they're inefficient.
Yeah.
Have you ever dropped to like?
I mean, we've always got, if you look at it at group level, you know, it might run at, I don't think it's ever run below 20, but it might be kind of 21, 22, something like that. Or maybe it has dropped a bit lower actually. But because within that, there'll be, if we start something up new, that's going to lose money for the first year. So all of a sudden, that group, we might make X, but then we're going to lose 150 grand that year because that's the investment that we've chosen to make. So ultimately, it will pull the group down. But if you strip those loss makers off, then underlying what you've got is a really solid business. You know, and that's the price you're always going to pay for the
How often do you look at investing in those loss makers? Like, is it an annual thing?
It's in terms of like, it'll be part of the strategy in terms of how we want to grow, but for how long we would. You know, for me, typically 2 years is kind of what it would take to get to the point where I think a business should be comfortably breaking even. And hopefully break even after year one, but my aim would always be by year 2 that they've not only broke even, they've now clawed some of that money back, but are running sort of fairly independently. So,
well, give us like the process then that you would go through to firstly identify a market or an opportunity. Then how do you get it off the ground? Like, give us an example. Process,
so I'll give you the most recent one. I'll not the most recent actually, but it's probably closer to home. So in Leeds, we set up a business. It runs as part of the group, but it's its separate entity. And the reason we did that is we wanted to give some equity, and that seemed a suitable way to do it. So we've got a minority shareholder in there. Sometimes that can be someone external, and by giving equity, it really allows us to attract those people. But in this case, it was someone internally. We wanted to get more into tech, but specifically within infrastructure. And the reason for that is looking at the markets we're in, even though they're great markets, I felt they were stronger markets that could offer better returns in terms of the contract book. So if I look at Leeds as a location, the salaries are higher, but not that much higher than, say, a Sheffield, a Doncaster, or wherever it might be. Really good talent pool. So what we did first is we really researched the market. We probably spent about 8 to 10 weeks delving into the market. Once we'd mapped it out to what we thought it was going to be, looking at the competition, looking at the areas we wanted to get into, which is primarily solution architects and data architects. So then we'd have calls with those candidates, not to say what do you do, but this is who we are, this is what we're trying to achieve, you're the expert, can you tell us kind of what's the contract landscape? This? So in this case, I
imagine you're not making those calls.
No, in this case, it's my right-hand guy, Justin, who's been with us from day one. So it'd be Justin.
So he physically goes and does the research?
Yeah, and he's just brilliant at that. He's the guy. He'd put him in kind of Saudi and he'd build a business. So he's great, what he's great at. And it's a really good combination. Justin's great at that, sort of get it off the ground, help them win clients, map the market out, and then I'll do much more of the kind of scaling it up and getting the processes in. So we spent lots of time really to make sure that the market we're in is definitely the market and hits all the commercials that we want it to hit. And then it's just time. So then it's the grind, the stuff you do with the recruitment.
Do you identify a market before you've potentially even got someone to lead it? Or do you work around a person?
No, we'd normally work around a person, or we'd hire somebody who's got the experience in that market. With this particular example, James, who runs it, he'd worked in the energy sector for us, brand new market for him, so he kind of just went on the journey. But the main thing was, it's how do we build a business that's going to offer the best returns, give us a far better timesheet value than we'd get in the UK on our traditional markets, and build as much enterprise value as possible. And that's exactly what we've done. So the work, we've won some really big UK clients, and then we've won some really big international clients where the longevity contract's over 2 years. The timesheet values are probably triple of what we get in the UK market. So if you go commercially, triple timesheet value, salaries are, proportionately higher, but certainly not double or triple. It just makes sense.
But isn't that in Leeds, or is that a different one?
Yeah, that's in Leeds. So the work that we're doing on the contractors will give us probably a
So that's not. But is that not in the UK though?
Some of the work's in the UK, a lot of it's international. We're doing quite a lot out in the Middle East and Saudi on really big global projects where the contractors are giving us a timesheet value that's 3 times that of the UK in our traditional market. So if you kind of go, well, just the economics of it, I'm getting 3 times the revenue when it's a 2-year contract length, which is longer than we get in the UK, and the salary that we're paying to the trainees that we're bringing on in the business is only proportionately higher or the same as it would be in another location. Yeah. That works, and it works for the recruiters because they're getting great commissions and great careers out of it. So,
are you selling solutions, or are you going in and filling one job and then growing off the back?
No, we do, and we've really moved on from this. So we've got a part of the business that operates in Germany. 50% of the work we do there is retained, and not just one-off retained. It's pretty much you spend X with us a year.
You get this.
We'll do 10, 20 placements a year, and it's a big chunk of work. We're very, very close to signing our first kind of MSP with a client, and some of the work we've talked about in kind of out in the Middle East and these global projects are where we've got exclusive deals to work on that project for an 18-month or 2 years.
How do you get that when you're new to a market, though?
It's fundamentally, it's down to, I think, it's just being really, really good at what you do. And our approach has always been, and this came from the recession, it's the inch wide, mile deep, where you know that market inside out. And if you can supply people that are critical on these major projects that can go in and have an impact, because the wrong people, the wrong personnel on those projects can cost it, can cost the client the project. It can cost lots and lots of money. The right people on those projects can really make a difference. Yeah. So, if you build that up where all of a sudden the key people on that project and you're at a really, really senior end are all your people, or lots of them are your people, clients start to really recognise the value that you bring into the table, and that's a different type
I'm just thinking, like, you're going into a new market.
Yeah.
You've probably got to leverage your work in other markets at the beginning to show that you're not like a one-man band star.
Yeah, so I suppose that's the beauty of the group. You can say, well, look, we've been around for 18 years. This is who we are. This is the profile. When we first went into that market, we did a lot of groundwork, which is similar to what we do. So it was an easy transition, but it was never the work we wanted. It was just to kind of get the wheels turning. And it took us probably, maybe 6-9 months to get that contract business, even the first placement, just in the area we wanted. But because we'd done the research, we never lost faith that it was the right market. We knew it was the right market. It was just going to take time. But kind of once you get the first one, then the second one, and then we get a client and open it up.
I think what I'm getting from what you've said, this wouldn't happen if you were billing. Yeah. None of this, because you've got the headspace to sit and think, to talk. 100%. Justin's not billing either, right?
No, Justin doesn't bill. He's like, I always say, he's like that boxer who can't retire. Just one more, just one more.
But again, that combination of you two, giving your time and interest to these brands, that's the difference between a small business trying to grow. They haven't got the time and the bandwidth and the headspace, so they have to just keep banging through what they're doing, whereas you can sit there and think.
100%. I think our growth was very purposeful in that we always wanted the contract book, because the contract book would offer the longevity and allow you to grow. And definitely with Justin, he's superb at what he does. It's just been a great combination. He's great at what some of the stuff I'm not as good at, and vice versa. So yeah, absolutely. I don't think you could do that. If you're on a desk billing day to day, then I think that's a recipe for being a lifestyle business.
Yeah.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
No, there's not. And I think I say this all the time, it's about aligning. What you've done really well is you've aligned it all with a vision.
Yeah.
So your behaviour, your research, the partnership, the way you're building, it's all aligned to your goals. A lot of people say they want one thing, but they do things that conflict that.
100%. And I'm quite a big reader on like business books, and there's a book called Scaling Up by this guy called Vern Harnish. And there's like loads of really good things, kind of takeaways in there. But we've really been analytical and looking at every bit of the business. So things down to like management. If you want to scale up a business, well, you've got to have really good managers to take trainees, develop them, upskill them. Mm-hmm. So we look at everything from the finding the right people, finding the best talent, onboarding them in the right way, integrating them the right way, upskilling them, and then of course retaining them. And a lot of people look at the bit of the trainee, and we do loads of that. We've got I know Paul, our L&D guy, and he does a brilliant job with it. But actually, the bit that sometimes missed is, well, what about the quality of the management team? Because often if you ask managers and recruiters what they do for a living, I think lots of the time I'm a recruiter, whereas really for me it should be I'm a manager, because that's the vocation, it's a skill. So we've got things like skill matrix where it looks at, before you even get to a manager, what does a good manager look like? Do you understand what the role is and what it takes? And then we're working with you to look at, to upskill you. But just a very quick example would be if just because it's a really easy one to give, but if someone said, as a manager, I'm really good at forecasting, ours is evidence-based, so if it was me that was assessing them, I'd say, well, show me your forecast and explain to me what forecast is, what the purpose is. They could show me it, but we'd go to the next level where we'd say, now show me your forecast from the last 3 months and let's check it against what was actually delivered, so we can see as a percentage, were you 50% of what you said, or were you 110%? Yeah. And if you're 110%, sign off, because clearly you can do it. So being that detail then creates that management team, and it's that management team that have the ability then to go and ultimately grow good teams and, get the best out of teams. And I always say, if you have 2 managers who are running 2 teams, same market, the better skilled manager, the best leader will always get the best result, 100%. And to be honest, even if I had a good market and an average market, one with a bad manager, one with a really exceptional manager in a poor market, I'd take that manager every day of the week, because they'd kind of outperform. So yeah.
Well, I got 90. My business today is the first day of Q4, and we were 99% of quarter target. So how do you feel about 99%? I said last night going, I'm happy, but I'm like, it's such a small amount of money when you get to 1%.
I was talking to somebody the other day who they run a tech business, and it was at the school drop-off actually, or a school event, and we were just chatting about kind of business, and he was telling us a little bit about theirs. And he said something that resonated, just because it's so true to your point. And he said, the thing is, we're not very good at celebrating wins. We're always just focusing on what could we have done better. And I just said to him, but for me, that's the marker of a good business, because I think if you're celebrating too much, it's kind of, you're a bit complacent. I think when you lose that hunger.
Mikel Arteta, innit? Too much celebrating last season.
Yeah.
So what would you say though? If someone got 99% of forecast, would you be happy with that? Is that someone who can forecast accurately?
Yeah, from a manager's perspective, if someone was 99%, I don't think I'd worry too much about 1%, because there are things that can kind of move it, and we look at it always over a period of time. But the point is, I think just skilling people up gives the best possible platform then for the business to. Grow.
What do you see in the best attribute, or the most important attributes of an effective recruitment business manager? Someone who runs a team, of multiple people. What are you looking for from those people?
If I was to boil it down to just one word, I'd say at the core of it is communication. Like that's it. It's the ability to communicate first and foremost. Because without that, you can't take people on a journey, you can't engage people, you can't make people feel part of your business, you can't make people feel like, even on a bad day, they're winning. And particularly with trainees, I think you've got to, it's about confidence, as we all know. And there's lots of people come into the industry and fall out the industry, not because maybe they couldn't do it, just they were in the wrong environment to be able to really prosper. So, the attributes, first and foremost, I think, are ability to communicate, and that takes also being a really good listener. I think being a coach and a mentor is critical. Part of our skills matrix is active listening, and that's really being on a desk, in a banker desk or an environment, tuned in what's going on. I always say to the guys, if you just stop what you're doing for the moment and you just observed everything that's going on in your team, but look at it objectively, like what's not working. Take the emotion away. Take the emotion out. What's not working? Where are people struggling? You'd quickly write a list, and that's great because then you can go and improve it, but do it in a really productive way. Don't go and beat people up. Yeah. Do it in a coaching way to try and help them on the journey. I think the days of kind of beasting people or you make calls now and I'll listen to you. It's just giving them the guidance, be the coach, let them practice, and then take them on a journey.
Are your teams 5 days a week in an office, or?
We've got some remote working. So we were very sort of deliberate in when we changed things, because what I saw, at the time when it kind of really kicked off with COVID, you had one extreme to another. You had certainly like 5 days in the office and others who like work from anywhere you like, type thing. So I think there is real value people being in the office, because how do rookies learn?
What you just said there is impossible, really.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we do is that it's tiered. So I think the most experienced people who aren't managers can have, I think it's up to 3 days, and then the least experienced up to 1 day. But to be honest, and it varies, some do take the full lot of time, a lot don't. But my view is just the starting point is create an environment where people actually want to come in, they get on with the teammates, they want to be part of that hum and buzz. But
if you've got like a manager that's only doing 2 days or 3 days in the office, and you've got a team that are there all the time, there's a gap there, isn't there? There's a 10 to 20% gap.
Yeah, the managers are fundamentally all in full time. Right. I think they can take 1 day, few do, but
they've got to believe in it. They've got to see the vision again. But it's your ability to communicate that to them, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's. I think as you get bigger, that is one of the massive things we've had to get way better at. Is decisions have to be a little bit more thought out. They have to be communicated correctly. You have to over communicate, rather than back in the days, kind of, you'd go this and then that. Because you're in a small team, people know what's going on. But the communication, the onus is always on the person doing the communicating. So yeah, that ability to communicate that to the managers is important, which we do write the skills matrix, because ultimately, if you want to work from home 3 days a week, that's okay, but be a principal, don't be a manager, because you're going to need to be in to upskill the team.
The thing, so my business is actually 100% remote, and we have days where we meet like this, where I've got my team, we're all in Dubai in 2 weeks' time together. But we've 100% gone in with that. Yeah. To me, I don't think there's a right or wrong way to do any of it, but I believe the word you said is deliberate.
Yeah.
And I've thought this through for my business and how I want to live and how I want the team to be, and it works for us. If I feel like it's not, I'll reevaluate it. But do you agree that it's about being deliberate and it's about owning the decision? And some people won't want to be a part of that, and that's okay. We've lost some people because they're like, I just don't like being remote. I'm like, cool, you're going to have to go then, because I'm not changing my business for you.
Yeah, 100%. I think being very clear on the business you're building from the outset and recruiting people that have that shared vision and are aligned with your business is critical, because without that, it's going to be a hard job. And it's okay that if, they aren't a fit, that's okay. Go and find somewhere that is a fit. But deliberate and communicating that from the outset, and then being very consistent. Like the big word we use internally is alignment. Making sure from the outset the what we sell to people coming into the business, whatever level it is aligned throughout. So the reality of them joining the business, their expectation is met, and it's both ways. They've got to understand what we expect from them, and vice versa. but it's a line throughout. The worst thing is, well, I thought I was coming into this, and actually it's this, and that's where you're going to have lots of problems. And I think just last thing I'd say on the management bit, and one we really push as well, is just the this kind of high performance in the sense of, like, I'm a big believer in it's, as a leader, it's showing up every day and doing the best you can do on that day. No one's a 10 out of 10 every day. We all have great days, kind of poor days. But, if someone was judged on their worst day and they're consciously kind of aware that I didn't have a great day, but I did the best I could do in that particular day, in those particular circumstances, well, for me, that's kind of high performance. And we actually had a manager internally recently who said it's something had been picked up in one of the teams that maybe that particular day wasn't great. And the journey that he went on, he'd said to me something along the lines of, I felt a little bit put out that I'd almost been picked up on that particular day, that I wasn't at the top of my game. He said, but I've come to realise that it's not about that when I'm on the top of my game, it's actually about the value it's the worst day and how good I am on that day. Which again, going back to alignment, it's finding people that, already kind of think that way or can be moulded that way and understand that from the outset makes the journey here easier.
Love it. So one of my final questions now is, like, where are you going, right? Yeah. So you mentioned the numbers, 2 million EBIT, 110, 120 people, you've obviously 18 years of doing this. What's the vision?
Well, if I may, I'll tie it up sort of in two ways. So I'll kind of touch on work-life balance, which kind of fits into the kind of question anyway. So kind of two things on work-life balance. I'd say when people start a business, number one is really understanding your why, because it's so important, because lots of people start a business without really thinking about what they're wanting to grow. Yeah. If you were growing a work-life balance type business, or you're a business for work-life balance, lifestyle type business, then knowing that from the outset, you would design a business around it. So, if I want to work 30 hours, if I want to do the school run, what things can I do that would support that would just be sensible. In the same way that if you were building a business to try and scale it, as we have, as I described earlier, it's been very sort of deliberate and understanding what you've got to do to go and scale it. Because without that, for me, it's kind of jumping in a car and just going, come on, Sean, we're going to go somewhere. We just want to driving, getting somewhere and going, this is not what we want it to be or where we want it to be. So the journey I've been on is, done it 18 years, still love it. But the sort of second question I ask myself, and this is still work in progress, by the way, but it is kind of when's enough growth enough or worth the sacrifice personally? So I've got a young family. I think my kids are 5 and 2, coming up to 3, so at a great age. And I could easily convince myself or create a narrative that actually I need to go and open that new office, I need to do this, I need to do that. And that'd probably be supported by most people around me, because it's like, one, social media and entrepreneurship now is the thing, and two, it affords us a great living and all that sort of thing. But if I'm really honest with myself, do I need to do all those things at the stage we're at? And the answer is no. Even though I want to do it for my own ego. So the journey
Ego's
I'm
the key
on,
word.
It is, and it is ego. And even though I want to do those things to satisfy my own ego, what I'm trying to do is more make sure that I spend more time with the family and the young kids, because they're kind of the moments you're not going to get back. So, whether that's a school run, whether it's, I'm currently doing the marathon club with my 5-year-old running laps of the school, which is kind of early afternoon. I would have never have done those things before. I just wouldn't have done them. Whereas now it's like a conscious decision to do that. And I think if we all lived our personal life, imagine you gave as much passion as much energy, as much hard work, as much tenacity into your personal life as you did your business. Like, I'd be the best dad, the best partner, the best brother, the best friend, and like those things have been sacrificed over the years. So to answer your question, still very much growth, and the aim is to get the group to at least a 5 million EBIT. I think as we continue to grow, there's probably going to be a bit more shared ownership, some of the key people that have been on the journey with us, and then we'll see where we go from there. But the deliberate bit from me would be very much that it's not necessarily going to be me opening all those offices, and my journey now will be replacing me with a better me over this next however long it takes, year, 2, 3 years, whatever it takes, so that I can make sure that I don't miss out on those sort of key moments.
So what you're saying is the business growth is still there, but how you grow will have to adapt, because it's just as important for you to be present at home and be a good dad.
Yeah, 100%.
What do you think will happen? Let's say you do get to 5 million and would you want to leave and walk away? Would you want to stay in? Like, you strike me as someone who I think you'll find it underwhelming based on what you said before. I think you're mentally so tuned into the business. What do you think?
I think my sort of biggest fear is just walking away and doing nothing. So whether or not it would be, I would have to have something else going in the background, just because if not, I think I could imagine, just feeling empty once it's all done. So I don't know, probably more thought needed around it, but it'll be to do something. I just don't think I'm the retiring type.
I don't think you are. You could stay in the business in some capacity, sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's lots of options now. I know like the employee trust seem really popular, or I don't know, but there'll be some route, I think, that that I go down. But and I still really enjoy it, so I wouldn't want to not be involved. It's just going to Australia previously when we opened, that was great, and you can't do that now. You can't do it. Yeah, I actually did it for a week, and it was like the worst week, where you got, and Spencer, my oldest, he was only probably about 3.5, and he's really upset because he doesn't know where he's going. It's just completely different. So.
Yeah, I've got my daughter's one on Thursday.
Yeah.
And it's just different. Like, I think completely differently now than I did before. And I mean, I'll tell you a quick story that I was in LA 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And that was probably the first trip where I went away with, and I realized that even though my baby, I was still a stepdad, it felt different. Yeah. And I just didn't want to be there most of the time. But anyway, I'm in an Uber, and the guy driving, I mean, I looked at his photo on Uber app, but I didn't really pay any attention. Anyway, I'm sat behind, I'm on my phone, I look up and I see this guy's hands. Yeah. They're the oldest hands I've ever seen holding a steering wheel in my life, right? They just look so old. And I'm quite an inquisitive guy. So I'm sat there and he's asking me questions straight away. Hey, Sean, how's it going? And I looked at him and I thought, I've got to ask him. I was like, can I just ask you a question? He was like, I said, how old are you? He goes, 93.
Wow.
I was like, 93 years old? He said, yep. I said, why are you driving an Uber at 93? Do you want to know the real story? He sold his business at 61, made over $300 million. Wow. He said his friends around him were successful people, and he had 12 years of the best retirement you could imagine, traveling, drinking, partying. All of his mates over that period are all dead now. They're all gone. And for the last 8 years, he's felt the most empty, he said. His wife's still alive. She's cooking his, what was he called, nut roast or something she was cooking. And but he was like, I wish I'd never sold that, because he had like basically real estate branches all over the US. He said he wishes now he was like some kind of chairman to that business, and he could dip into the company that he built. But instead, he has to drive Uber to have conversation, to meet people, to stay fulfilled. And it was one of the best journeys. I mean, I love the guy. I'd love to have stayed in touch. But it made me realize, like, grass might not always be greener. No. And you shut that door and no one wants you anymore. Yeah. Like, does the next project necessarily mean it's going to be better than being connected to the first project? I don't know. It's like saying my kids get older, so I'll move on to another group of kids. Like, I don't know. It just really made me think.
Yeah, it's interesting because, in the background, we've had lots of conversations over the years with, primarily Justin, but you talk about what the future holds. And it is exactly that, stopping something, starting something, it's going to be, much of the same. It's like, well, why not just do what you were going to do in what you're doing? But I think for me, as I say, it's just that balance of, I think for the business to really grow, I think maybe it will be. I'll stay involved, but just
you need to be an arm's length.
Just an arm's length.
You need to be there. You need to be adding value enough for both parties to see it. If you're just there because you feel good, that won't work, and vice versa. Final question, right? This was written by a previous guest, so I'm every episode I'm getting previous guests to give me questions, and I'm just throwing them out. One guest asked me to ask you, like, what is the genuinely worst moment you've had as the founder of Navartis based on something you did?
Based on something I did.
That you could take accountability for a mistake or something. Okay. And then how do you reflect on that, and what did you learn? So I have to be careful kind of with the details around it, but I made a hire for a really senior finance person to work internally. As the person we had previously was okay, safe, steady pair of hands, but we were growing a lot and they just didn't fit anymore. It coincided with my first child, so I was out of the business a bit more, and it coincided with COVID. So I'd gone from having a vice grip to having an arm's length relationship. And that person brought a new finance system in, and it was just an absolute car crash. The person exited. It did hundreds and hundreds of thousands pounds worth of damage. And that was kind of just the tip of the iceberg. And putting this system in, that kind of was unchecked. I had to come back into the business. So it was on me. I hired this person and didn't manage them tightly enough. And just assume that it'd all be good because it'd always been good. And they had this profile that you expected.
Yeah, I'd had the profile, qualified, all that sort of stuff. So I had to come back into the business kind of as soon as we could get back in the office, write the system off. I think just to write it off was 150 grand. We had to buy another for about 150. And it took me probably the best part of a year to straighten the company up. So it'd gone from being a company that was always run ridiculously tight to all of a sudden just firefighting one thing after another. That had all been created in this year, where on the surface, it's great, everything's good, me kind of running it arm's length, and then putting too much trust in someone's ability that clearly didn't have the ability. Thankfully, we sorted it all. But
so moving forward, then the learning is that no matter what the profile of the person coming in, you've got to stay close for a period of time.
Yeah, 100%. If I was to replace me, I think they need to work with me for a year or two. So I've seen them firsthand and slowly migrate that person and embed them properly into the culture. I think the mistake I made is it's always been good. It's finance, you qualified. It's like, where can it go wrong? But I learned a big lesson.
Well, that's what this show's about, revealing those lessons. Jim, thanks so much. Your honesty, your detail in a lot of the answers, I think, was incredible. I think there's so much for people to learn. If anyone just listened and thought, I'd love to speak to Jim, is LinkedIn the best place to drop you a note? Or
definitely LinkedIn. Sure.
Yeah.
Send me.
You're open to a chat with people?
Absolutely, yeah. And just as well, before we wrap up, I was going to say thanks for the RAG podcast, because even as someone really seasoned, I've taken a lot away from, there's been some really candid interviews, and I look up to certain companies that are bigger than us, and you're looking for kind of, well, what do they do? And there's been loads of takeaways that I think it's such a valuable thing for the industry, people to have a library of this kind of candid source of information. And then particularly for someone starting up, I mean, I would have loved the podcast when I started up to I'd been watching every episode 5 times over. So it's a real service to the industry. So
pleasure.
Thanks
so much. I appreciate that. We'll get you on again in the future. Yeah. I want I want to see how the next year or two pans out for you. I think with this evolution of your role, getting to that 5 million EBIT, I think there's a huge potential there. And if you're open to it, we'll get you back on.
Absolutely. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you as always for listening to today's show. I truly hope that you got value from it. Honestly, it's the only reason I take time every week to ensure that my audience, you guys, future and existing recruitment owners, you're learning from each other to make this industry that I love so much stronger. And today's episode is brought to you by my business, Hoxo. I'm the CEO and founder, and we're on a mission to help brand recruitment agencies and their people better. I want to help people have the tools to stand out in the most competitive markets in the world. So I'll see you again next week with another episode. Catch you soon.